Chapter 4, 2B's story, Alienation. To bunker, this is 9S reporting. Please connect me to the commander.
Roger, connecting to the commander.
Commander, we failed to destroy A2. The commander's warning that A2 had slaughtered multiple pursuers was warranted. While A2 was an obsolete model, she was still a formidable opponent. 2B shuddered at the thought of what could have happened if they had thought any longer. Their battle was cut short when A2 escaped. They tried to chase her after she jumped from the window, but whatever route she took, they couldn't keep up.
I'm glad both of you are safe. That was an extremely dangerous individual. Do not approach that deserter carelessly,
said the commander. Muttered 9S hesitantly. Desertion from what? 2B had the same question as 9S. Desertion in itself was a serious matter, and a fellow number 2 was responsible. She couldn't help being curious about the past actions of an android that was identical to her. And A2 had said something strange as she left. That command had betrayed them. What did she mean by that?
That is confidential information. I can't tell you,
said the commander. Confidential. 2B didn't like that word. Nothing good ever came when that word was involved. Of course, it was necessary for organizations to have secrets. But for her personally, it always led to unpleasant things. 2B. She was brought back to reality by 9S. She hadn't realized that the transmission with the commander had ended. Let's ask Pascal about A2. He might know something, said 9S. 2B agreed that this was of high probability. Pascal had told them about the Forest Kingdom. A2 might have appeared in the forest before. If so, it was unlikely that Pascal had overlooked the presence of such a dangerous android. Last time, they had gone to investigate Pascal's village on command's orders. They had been assigned to gather data for valuable research materials. But this time was different. What she and 9S were about to do was not for a mission. On the contrary, they were contacting an enemy of their own volition. She wondered whether they should stop. Even so, there had recently been a lot of unfortunate events. There had been news about deserters just the other day. A few days previous, there had been a directive from command to capture thieves that were operating in the resistance camp. But that was only a facade. 2B had given a confidential and different set of instructions to hunt and execute deserters 8B, 22B, and 64B. The instructions were to kill, not capture. The clueless 9S liberally made use of his navigational abilities as a scanner type to find the androids. They informed the women that they were to be brought in. As expected, the trio attacked. Once deserters remanded to custody, only death awaited. The women had no choice but to fight their captors and run. 2B destroyed them. They had initiated the attack, so she pretended that destroying them was the only natural thing to do. It was a good excuse, but 9S had keenly noticed that something was wrong. After they returned to the resistance camp, he had asked Anemone for details of the thefts. Of course, Anemone had no recollection of such incidents. There had been no theft crimes to begin with. 9S called Operator 210 and asked for details about the theft crimes. However,
that incident is confidential. I can't find out for you,
said the operator. Standing by his side, 2B could tell this was going south, but all she could do was keep her arms folded and observe.
9S, be careful,
said the operator. 210 did not know that 8B and his accomplices were deserters, or that the incident was fiend. But she probably sensed something was off as well. That's why she warned 9S to be careful. That sincere warning must have provoked the growing suspicion that 9S had of command. 2B? Asked 9S. Never mind. All right, let's go, said 2B. In the end, 2B did not stop 9S. At this point, even she tried to turn back from visiting Pascal. 9S would not have given up. That was a defining quality of the scanner type. 9S would probably visit Pascal on his own. That was unacceptable. Pascal? This is 9S. 2B listened with mixed feelings as 9S told Pascal that they had questions for him. Nevertheless, they were unable to get significant information from Pascal. Wary of a transmission being monitored, they made a direct visit.
This android named A2. I have past records of her, but she has never come to this village.
Pascal added that she was indeed a dangerous android. 2B was reminded of the fact that A2 had killed a helpless machine too young to walk. 2B and 9S had seen not a moment of hesitation from her. And she was strong. She fought on par with, if not beyond, the level of the newest models. From the machine's point of view, she must be a terrifying android.
I'm sorry. That's all I know,
said Pascal. He could clearly see the disappointment on 9S's profile as he said, I see. 9S walked dejectedly through the short out to the city ruins. At times, he looked like he was thinking. He was probably considering the next step. That was dangerous. 2B stopped him by calling out his name. Why do you ask Pascal for information about A2? Asked 2B. She sounded like she was interrogating him. She now regretted not stopping him and letting him get involved in such a perilous matter. Command does not recommend contacting a machine without permission, said 2B. Even if it were out of pure curiosity, Command could see it as a problem. Furthermore, this time his actions were based on suspicion and not curiosity. If Command were to find out... I'm sorry. 9S crestfallen behavior flustered 2B. Had she been too stern? She confronted him, even though scanner types were specialized for investigation and it was something they couldn't help doing. 2B quickly added but I admire your passion for knowledge, said 2B, even if that curiosity was a double-edged sword. Thanks, 2B. 9S's lips hinted at a smile. He was full of curiosity, frank and bright. A comrade that was like the gleaming rays of the sun. That's why, she wished. Don't get it wrong. You're only allowed to use that curiosity on the enemy, never anyone else. Don't even think about suspecting a comrade. Or Command. Let's go back to the resistance camp. We need to get a checkup and replenish our casses, she said. It might be in vain. The same thing might happen. Still. Because I promised you, thought 2B. Squadrons A to C are to patrol the coast. Squadrons D to E are to secure the ground transport route and... When they arrived at the resistance camp, Anemone was busy directing the troops. As always, there was a huge influx of people. 2B, 9S. Good timing. They didn't have to ask about the occasion. Anemone started to explain it was a restocking mission. There's an aircraft carrier that we, the android army, have deployed to the Pacific. That carrier's about to return, said Anemone. 9S looked like he remembered something. 9S, whose main mission was to collect information on Earth, was well informed about the military situation and deployments of other regions. You're talking about the Blue Ridge aircraft carrier, right? I've heard of it. Blue Ridge 2nd. I'm glad we're on the same page. Should we escort the carrier? No. I'd like you two to secure the coast, where the reserve missiles are stored. There have been multiple reports of machine sightings in that area. Most likely we'll be short-handed. That's where you two come in. 9S confidently replied to leave it to them. We're the newest models, unlike an older model like A2, said 9S. A2's name probably came up because she had been on his mind. Of course, they had just struggled to fight against the same older model. A2? Attacker? Number 2? Sputtered Anemone. Anemone's face suddenly paled. Anemone, do you happen to know A2? Asked 9S. No, I don't. Anemone had denied it, but it was most likely a lie. Unlike the YoRHa squadron, who had almost half their faces covered by goggles, it was easy to read the expressions of the resistance. I was just a bit curious, said Anemone. This was probably a lie as well. Anemone was clearly upset. Had something happened between Anemone and A2? Anyways, thanks for helping. If you have any YoRHa business, that can come first. Anemone wrapped up the conversation and turned around. From the back, 2B couldn't read any expression. The reserve missiles were siloed in an area near the coast called the Flooded City. True to its name, most of its buildings had sunk in the water. This area's foundation was destroyed in the previous war, and the city is still sinking to this day, said 9S. The buildings that were narrowly avoiding complete submersion now must have been quite the high-rises in the past. At this point, only the roofs were peeking out of the water. Even the ground had slowly started sinking, and the soil was damp. There was mud in some places, which made the footing unstable. Enemy's information had been accurate. There were machines roaming the ground and the roofs of the sunken buildings. There were walking types, flying types, small-sized and medium-sized. It was like looking at an encyclopedia of machines. The pair destroyed the machines one at a time, making their way toward the location of the stored missiles. The weather was clear, to the point that the sunlight erratically reflecting off the ocean's surface hurt 2B's eyes. Strangely enough, the water was always clear when they came here, and 9S would always say, "It's perfect day for fishing, isn't it?" It was at that moment, when 2B was thinking that she had only ever come here to perform oceanic research, that Pod opened its communication display. The commander reported that it was an emergency.
"I'm sure both of you know, but the aircraft we possess is scheduled to stop at the port to restock. But that carrier has been ambushed by machines and it is currently in battle. I've already contacted all the YoRHa squadron troopers that are stationed near the city ruins, but I'd like you two to give your assistance as well. I'll send the map data and flight units. Over."
The flight units came flying down from the sky, as if they had been waiting for the transmission to end. They'd probably been launched before the transmission had started. "Don't you think the commander's really harsh on people?" asked 9S. 9S sighed, as if he wanted to complain that they had just finally gotten a break from exterminating the nearby machines. She could understand his sentiment, but this was an emergency. 2B rebuked 9S. "She wouldn't be a good leader if she wasn't like that," said 2B. To operate as a group, it was ill-advised to consider the individual's feelings. It was necessary to ignore the little things and think instead about how the group should act as a whole. It was imperative to quickly decide what was indispensable and what was not, and to bear the full responsibility of those decisions. 2B knew that the commander was such a person. "I understand, logically, but," said 9S. It looked like 9S had more to say, but 2B ignored him and entered the flight unit. It was clear that aircraft carrier Blue Ridge II was struggling at first glance. Flying-type machines were herding around the carrier and attacking relentlessly.
"It's like a swarm,"
said 9S. "A swarm?" asked 2B.
"It's a word used to describe tiny insects that are flying together in a large group,"
explained 9S. "Never mind. We're going to destroy them," said 2B. 2B transitioned the flight unit to maneuvering mode and started to bat away the machines one by one. Looking down, she could see the escort ship drifting among the waves. With its low mobility, this number of machines had probably been too much to handle for the escort ship. But there weren't enough ships on the carrier to defend itself either.
2B, there's a signal for Goliath-class enemy, toward the southeast."
She saw a Goliath-class enemy approaching from the sky. Its shape was analogous to the horseshoe crab machine they had captured on a previous ocean research outing. The similarities ended at the shape, as its size was on a completely different scale. 2B turned the flight unit around sharply. The firepower from a Goliath-class machine could annihilate the carrier in one blast. She needed to take care of the machine before it could get in range, or else the aircraft carrier was in danger.
9S, get to a higher altitude!
The Goliath-class machine was gathering mines. There were small type area machines that could be a nuisance, but none were as destructive as mines. 2B and NS batted away small types as they closed in on the Goliath class. They repeated the process of neutralizing the artillery, destroying the oncoming small types, and attacking the Goliath class.
"Confirming the destruction of the enemy flying type," said 2B.
The horseshoe crab-shaped machine listed to the side and hurtled down, taking the surrounding small types along. There was no indication that it would be back in the air.
"Now we will go support the carrier," said 2B.
"Wait, I'm still getting a signal from a Goliath class,"
said 9S. What was 9S saying? They had just destroyed the Goliath class. It was confirmed to be non-functional.
"From where? Such a huge—"
9S's yelling was drowned out by the somewhat similar sounding roar. At the same time, the surface of the ocean suddenly welled up. 2B had thought that an underwater explosion had created the pillar of water, but she was wrong. The crest of the wave struck the bottom of Blue Ridge Second, flipping it over. 2B saw the water coil around the carrier. It wasn't the water itself, but something in the water that bit into the carrier. The next moment, the carrier split in two and sank down into the depths of the ocean.
What is that?
Asked 2B. It was an enemy of impossible scale. It was larger than any Goliath class she had witnessed. There were 3 large eyes, and 4 smaller eyes beneath them. They were all glowing red, a sign that the machine was hostile.
A monster.
Nanus' words were on the mark. A machine monster that was extraordinarily large and powerful. It had reduced the carrier to scrap in seconds. That one attack was enough to indicate how this battle was going to go. What were they going to do? How were they going to turn the tables in such a situation? 2B searched for an answer as she stared down the glistening red eyes. The enemy was formidable as expected, perhaps even beyond her expectations. First of all, the flight unit's artillery had no effect. Electromagnetic waves enveloped and shielded the machine's body. It was even strong enough to obstruct a laser strike from the satellites. They tried to inflict damage by shooting rounds from raid cannons into its mouth, the only unprotected region. While the attacks were not obstructed, as had been the laser, they were unable to damage the machine at all. Furthermore, something happened that made 2B doubt her eyes. The monster stood up, in its full glory. It was a human-shaped machine of a size that defied logic. What she had thought was its full body had just been its head. They had done everything they could. The destructive satellite laser and their unorthodox scheme to shoot cannons into the mouth had failed entirely.
How do we beat such an enemy?
Every troop in the Allied forces must have muttered the same words as 2B. The monster did not stop. White sparks scattered erratically around its mountainous body. It was discharging electricity. 2B could feel the reverberation. It was similar to the rumbling that had collapsed the city ruins, but this time there was a feeling of unrest even greater than before.
This is bad. Let's withdraw,
said Ninus. The monster shook its giant body and plunged toward them. 2B tried to escape, but she was too late. She felt herself get blown away. She braced herself for the impact against the ground, and the damage that would come with it. But that moment never came. Instead of an impact, she felt something gently absorb her fall.
Are you okay, Mrs. 2B?
Pascal?
Said 2B. She saw that Ninus' flight unit had been caught in the air by machines, the villagers from Pascal's village.
Thank you for saving me,
said 2B. She had thought that machines were incapable of having emotions. She had felt apprehensive when they said they were supporters of peace, even after she knew they were harmless, and perhaps more so because she knew. She hesitated to believe them. But those same machines had come to save her. She simultaneously felt a sense of relief and anxiety. Scared to identify the origin of those feelings, she intentionally focused her attention on the danger in front of her and glared at the monster.
That giant machine was a weapon that was discarded in the past,
said Pascal, revealing the identity of the monster as he moved to safety.
At that time, I was connected to the machine network, so I remember it. The moment it stepped onto land, it went berserk and started attacking everything, without conscience. You weren't able to stop it, and eventually had to abandon it in the ocean. That's right,
said 9S from a transmission.
When Command was briefing me on the enemy, its landing was confirmed to be 320 years ago. Apparently, the escorting resistance was wiped out.
In other words, we have to prevent it from coming onto land, or else there will be another tragedy. But how?
Said 2B. The artillery equipped on the flight unit had no effect. Even the satellite lasers were obstructed by the electromagnetic waves. Thus, it was likely that an explosion from a black box response would not be enough to destroy the machine completely. Was it even possible to stop the enemy?
The missiles! The ones that were supposed to be restocked onto the aircraft carrier!
Shouted 9S. They had already verified from their previous trials that physical attacks directed inside the mouth would not be obstructed. Fortunately, the missiles they had been protecting were still unharmed.
I'm going to see if we can use them,
said 9S. To control the missiles, meddling with its program was necessary.
Okay, I'll cover you,
said 2B. 9S's flight unit flew in a straight line towards the missile launch pad. 2B had cleared out the small-type machines that followed to free 9S's path. While the number was dwindling, there was a substantial amount of small types.
So this is called a storm, right?
She thought, as she recalled 9S's explanation in the back of her mind. As she was busy shooting down small-type machines, she saw the missile activate. The angle of the launching pad adjusted. 9S's flight unit hung on beside the missile. She heard Pod 153 to declare that the missile was ready to fire through the transmission.
"Fire!"
said 9S. 2B got out of the way of the missile's path at full throttle. The missile flew toward the monster. The monster opened its mouth, perhaps an attempt at intimidation. The missile struck right inside that opening. The monster's body started to shake, as if it were writhing. There was a resounding roar that sounded similar to thunder. It was a dreadful sound. Right when 2B thought she should have kept more distance, her vision went white. Darkness came just as she realized she had been caught up in the explosion. The first thing she heard was static, but it eventually turned into the sound of the repeating crash of waves. She could see the colors of sand and rust. She had fallen face down. 2B slowly righted her body. She would stagger a little, but not enough to impair her walking. Looking back, she saw a misshapen mountain off the shore. It was the remains of the monster. It had been charred while standing, and there was a stroke rising from various areas. It was clearly non-functional. She recollected the events leading up to this moment. The missile had found its target inside the mouth of the monster, and an EMP explosion had followed. 9S had succeeded in controlling the missiles. But she didn't see 9S, or Pascal and his villagers.
To bunker. This is 2B reporting. Please reply.
She needed to gouge the information before regrouping with 9S.
"Mrs. 2B, this is Operator. Are you okay?"
Operator 60 was always lively, but today her voice was especially high-pitched, perhaps because she was in a panic.
Performing a body check. No problems with basic function, said 2B.
"Thank goodness."
2B could almost hear 60's sigh of relief. Half of her was amused at 60's overreaction, and half of her felt guilty for making 60 worry so much. Yet she made an effort to talk with a composed voice.
I'd like you to update me on the situation.
Roger that. In regards to the Super Goliath class machine that invaded the coast, it was confirmed to be non-functional 8 hours ago thanks to your efforts.
8 hours? That long?
2B could see why 60 had such a high-pitched voice. She had been incommunicado for 8 hours, so 60 had a very valid reason to be frightened.
Multiple transmission facilities are dysfunctional from the EMP explosion, and consequently communications, as well as repair of various matters, has fallen behind.
This was understandable, given the scale of the attack and the fact that it had been an EMP explosion instead of a normal explosion.
So, where's 9S?
60 hesitated for a moment.
I'm able to detect a slight black box response, but I'm unable to determine its location.
If there was a black box response, he was alive. However, if it was so weak his location was indeterminable, there was a high likelihood that 9S was critically injured.
I'm going to begin a search for 9S. Please send the commander an application for consent.
Oh, a directive has already been issued. The commander requests that the search for surviving YoRHa troopers be prioritized.
While that was relieving to hear, it also brought full realization of how long she had been immobilized.
Mrs. 2B, please help Mr. 9S.
2B said,
Roger that,
and started running. 2B wrapped up the search around the coast quickly and returned to the resistance camp. The sensors Pod 042 was equipped with were unable to detect weak signals. According to Pod, the search required a specialized scanner. Fortunately, there were records of this type of scanner being used at the resistance camp. If they were lucky, the scanners would still be stored there. Once she found enemy, 2B cut straight to the chase.
I'm looking for a specialized scanner that can detect weak black box responses.
A specialized scanner? Asked Anemone. For a brief moment, Anemone frowned,
but quickly nodded and said, "Ah, you've been through a lot." She must have heard about the search effort for YoRHa troopers. She had immediately understood what it meant when 2B came back to the camp during her search. That's the device they were using. Perfect timing. They just came back from an expedition. They? There are some androids with red hair over there. Go ask them. Roger that. It was a great help that Anemone was always straight to the point. But right as 2B turned around, Anemone stopped her again with a, "2B." This was rare. "The red-headed androids are..." Anemone stopped there. "What?" "No, never mind." 2B was curious about what Anemone had to say, but she didn't bother her any further. There was no time to waste. Looking around, sure enough, there were red-headed androids. She originally thought there was one android, but there were two. Her gaze met with one of them. "What are you looking at?" It was a stinging tone of voice. The way her hair stood up in every direction and reminded 2B of an animal with its fur standing on end. "Devola, stop being so scrappy." "You're being too carefree, Popola." From this exchange, 2B deduced that the one prepared to fight was named Devola, and the one that rebunked her was named Popola. Popola had the same red hair, but it was straight. Their hair seemed to reflect their respective personalities. "I'm sorry. What can we do you for?" asked Popola. "I'm looking for a scanner that can detect weak black box responses." Devola was the one that unexpectedly answered her request. We constructed something like that in the past." Devola swiftly stood up and started to rummage through some baggage on the side. "If you're trying to detect a black box response, that means you're looking for someone, right?" Popola asked, with her head slightly tilted to the side. It seems she hadn't been informed of the search for YoRHa troopers. Anemone had said they were fresh off an expedition, so they probably hadn't received the news yet. Now that she thought about it, their shabby look was probably a result of an extensive period in the field. "Here it is. If you want it, you can have it," said Devola. Devola placed a small chip designed for a pod in 2B's palm. After she said her thanks, Devola's lips curled up into a smile. Her smile was unbelievably friendly compared to her abrasive first impression. "I hope you find him soon," said Popola. Popola's smile was almost imperceptibly subtle. Her reserved expression and way of speech were completely opposite of Devola's, even though she shared the same hair and the same face. "If you need anything else, just tell us," said Popola. "Don't involve yourself with us too much, though," said Devola. "Oh, Devola." Popola elbowed Devola from the side. Devola said, "It's true," as she scowled back. From this exchange, to be deduced that these two had some special circumstances. This was probably the reason why Anemone had tried to tell her something and then stopped. She wasn't particularly interested in investigating or concerning herself with such circumstances. It would have been different if Command had issued an arrest directive, but since that wasn't the case, it didn't bother her. Everybody had one or two things they'd like to keep a secret, including herself. She returned to the flooded city and resumed her search. The scanner that Devola had made was very precise, allowing her to detect several black box responses she had missed before. There were weak signals coming from within the shadows of rubble, in between sunken buildings, and other places that were hidden. These were victims so wounded they were unable to call for help, let alone crawl out from under the wreckage. Every time 2B came across a victim, she administered a logic virus vaccine, sent the coordinates to the bunker, and requested rescue. Of all the wounded she had found, 9S was not among them. "But I'm able to detect the black box response." Why wasn't she able to determine his location? Either the signal was too weak, or he was too far away.
Proposition. The search target 9S was involved in a large explosion at sea.
Pod circled around from the back.
Recommendation. Increase search radius.
There's a possibility that he was blown away farther?
Affirmative.
It was fine if he was blown away toward land, but what if he was swept away farther into the sea? Just thinking of the possibility sent chills down her spine.
Negative.
I haven't said anything yet.
All information regarding 9S is speculative. Therefore, It is meaning to agonize over a hypothesis constructed on unproven data.
Okay. It was true. It was pointless to be dismayed by her wild imagination when all the information she had was uncertain. That aside, you're talking a lot today, Pod.
Affirmative. I am a support unit. I will converse based on need.
She had a realization. Pod was speaking so much because 9S was not here. Normally, 9S would be beside her, chatting constantly. Now, Pod needed to initiate conversation, or else there was silence. It had probably determined that this was unacceptable.
Recommendation: increase the amount of conversation initiated by 2B.
I decline. It was 9S's job to talk and smile a lot. Nobody could be the replacement. Even if someone used the same words and expressions, they wouldn't be 9S. At least, they wouldn't be the same 9S to her. She contemplated such thoughts as she walked along the beach. Suddenly, she heard a groan from beneath the pile of corpses. The scanner was picking up a signal as well.
Report: Black Box Response Detective. Confirmation of life signs.
She dragged a cassette that was half submerged in ocean water. The clothes had absorbed water, making the body awfully heavy. She struggled to bring it onto dry ground. Pod, give me a check module on logic virus vaccine. After 2B helped her cough out water and lay face up, the squadron trooper faintly opened her eyes. I've sent a rescue signal to the bunker, so help should come soon, said 2B. Thank you. It seemed that conversation was just barely manageable. We are trying to find our companion, YoRHa member 9S. If you have any information, I'd like you to share it. 9S? Ah, the boy that was with you. Anything helps. Please. That boy was sent flying by the explosion. She had witnessed 9S during the moment of the explosion. 2B's voice faltered when she had asked for the direction. The cries of the shore birds sounded unusual high.
Location of impact prediction. Coordinate data. Transferring.
Thank you. Pod replied that the transfer was complete. This is... Looking at the data, 2B understood why the scanner was unable to determine his location. 9S's location of impact was far more inland than the flooded city. I appreciate it. Stay here until the rescue team comes. I hope you find him. 2B responded with a firm nod and started running toward her destination. Another side. Adam. The more I know, the less I understand. The more research, the more misguided I am. Humans are a species filled with mysteries and inconsistencies. To begin with, humans and machines are remarkably different in the ways they live. While living as a group, humans are not connected by a network. At first glance, they seem to favor living for the self, but at the same time, they seem to lack an attachment to the self. A striking example is self-duplication. Their self-duplication process is faulty and inconsistent. It's not like they didn't have the technology to perform perfect self-duplication. It was possible, but they weren't willing to use the technology. Instead, they were committed to an imperfect system of self-duplication called reproduction. Furthermore, they didn't consider the original and the copy as the same individual. They saw them as distinct identities. The original was called a parent, and the copy was called a child. Rather than an original and a copy, this relationship was closer to a creator and a creation. Since humans already had androids, which were their creations, there was really no need to degrade their own self-duplicate as a creation. I don't understand. It's a mystery. On the other hand, our creators did not leave a trace of mystery. They were a worthless bunch. They were flimsy, had no diversity, and did not have a shred of creativity. In comparison, how glorious the mystery of humans was. No matter how much I studied and studied and studied and studied, I could not study enough. Hey, big brother, why are you reading a book? Knowledge makes a person rich. Can't you just transfer the data? If I don't read it myself, I won't speak to my heart. Okay, I see. The written characters that humans left behind, with only a few dozen combinations of them. Humans were surprisingly able to create intricate worlds and write about them. They didn't just write down information. The stories were small worlds themselves. By reading the combinations of characters, humans were able to absorb part of the world. It was something that the data transfer could never accomplish. I believe a large part of human diversity was due to the power of books. While zealously reading books, I came upon a realization. There was a recurring concept that provided a basis for human action and choice. It was death. Humans love to reuse phrases like, for dear life, about to die, going to die, and rather than die. There were even whole books written on the topic of death. This was particularly common in genre philosophy. Death. It was a concept that was hard to grasp for us machines. We, who are connected to a network, never die. If a core runs out of energy or we're destroyed, we will stop functioning. But a reboot is always possible. A machine malfunction that can't be rebooted is apparently different from death. Humans were able to create many things from their fear of death. They tried to overcome death, but couldn't. While they had the technology, in the end they coexisted with death. Was death really something so difficult to let go of? Was it full to irresistible splendor? If I, a machine, were to one day understand death, would I understand humans? Perhaps it was a curse that we machines yearned to understand humans. In addition to myself, my brethren also mimicked humans. They mimicked their words, their actions, their emotions, their aesthetics, their relationships. Why? Why do we have such an obsession over humans? Hey, big brother, can I break this? No, you can't. If you break it, it'll be useless. But it did some bad things to Big Brother, right? That's right. But don't break it. Fine. Didn't have to be a reason for a feud with androids. Besides, it was never a fight to the death. Both sides could regenerate as many times as necessary. But would she and I be able to fight to the death if she was given a reason to fight? Big brother, let's play. I'm busy. Let's play human. Later, okay? When can we play? After I finish my business. Okay, I'll wait until you finish your business. That's right. Wait here. Here? Can you wait by yourself? If I wait here, will you play with me? All right. Then I'll wait. Good boy. I'll wait until Big Brother comes back. I certainly couldn't take Eve along. He would have immediately revived me. A machine malfunction that can be resolved by a reboot is different from death. I want to understand. I want to get to the bottom of humanity. When that happens, I will be freed from the ghosts of my creators.